Trump is planning to sacrifice Ukraine to destroy China. And it might actually work. You may not want to hear this analysis, but geopolitical realities aren't written by our emotions. The intelligence I received last week from my sources in Washington shocked me. Trump's first 100-day plan is completely different from what the liberal media is telling us. This isn't an isolationist retreat. This is one of the biggest geopolitical moves in American history, and at its center lies a sacrifice that nobody predicted. America will abandon Ukraine to Russia. In exchange, it will pry Putin away from China. The world order will completely change in 100 days. Liberal analysts see Trump as Putin's puppet. Conservatives view him as an isolationist populist. Both are wrong. Trump is implementing classic American grand strategy. Divide your enemies, focus on the greatest threat. Think about it for a minute. What is America's biggest geopolitical problem? The risk of simultaneous conflict with two major powers. The Russia-China alliance is the Pentagon's nightmare scenario. War games show America cannot effectively fight both powers simultaneously in different theaters. Trump's solution is radical but logical. Neutralize Russia to isolate China. The numbers tell the story. Supporting Ukraine costs $100 billion per year, while preparing for a Pacific War requires another $200 billion in naval modernization. Even the world's largest economy has limits. China is America's real existential threat, not Russia. Moscow's GDP is smaller than South Korea's. Its population is declining by nearly 1 million people per year. Russia's military, despite nuclear arsenal, depends increasingly on outdated Soviet stockpiles and Iranian drones. But China is different. 1.4 billion people, the world's largest manufacturing capacity, America's only technological rival capable of challenging dominance across multiple domains. More importantly, China has what Russia lacks: time and momentum. China's economy is still growing. Its military modernization continues systematically. Chinese infrastructure investment dwarfs anything Russia can manage. China in 2035 will be far more powerful than today. Russia in 2035 will likely be weaker, more isolated, more dependent on energy exports to an increasingly green world. The demographic numbers tell the strategic story. China's economy is roughly 10 times larger than Russia's. Chinese manufacturing output exceeds America's. When China builds high-speed rail networks spanning continents, Russia struggles to maintain its Soviet-era trans-Siberian infrastructure. This disparity in capabilities makes clear which nation represents the genuine long-term challenge to American hegemony. So how will Trump split Russia from the alliance? Through the Ukraine bargain. Let's set aside emotional approaches to Ukraine. Let's make a cold, geopolitical calculation. What is Ukraine's strategic value to America? Keeping Russia away from NATO borders, demonstrating credibility to allies. These are meaningful concerns, but they must be weighed against costs. Here's Trump's calculation. Annual military aid to Ukraine costs $100 billion. The technology race against China requires $1 trillion over the next decade. Resources are limited. Every advanced weapon sent to Ukraine is one fewer available for Pacific conflicts. Trump is telling Putin, "You won in Ukraine, congratulations, but now help me against China or I'll leave you alone in Taiwan." For Putin, this is a good deal. He understands that China's rise ultimately threatens Russian interests in Siberia and Central Asia. Remember, the Russia-China alliance isn't ideological, it's pragmatic. Born from mutual opposition to American hegemony, not shared values. If American pressure decreases, their conflicts will resurface. Putin knows that China's economy is growing while Russia's stagnates, making Moscow the junior partner. Trump's offer is clear: accept the status quo in Ukraine, in exchange cut commercial ties with China. For Beijing, the situation is catastrophic. The investments it made in Russia were enormous. Energy infrastructure worth hundreds of billions, military technology transfers, non-dollar trading systems. Now this could be wasted. China's leaders understand that Russia has always been unreliable. Stalin abandoned Mao, Khrushchev withdrew Soviet advisors in the 1960s. Putin could easily accommodate the Americans rather than face an increasingly demanding Chinese partner. The economic mathematics are brutal for China. Without Russian energy at discounted prices, manufacturing costs increase significantly. Without Russian territory providing alternative routes, Chinese goods become more dependent on sea lanes controlled by the American Navy. When China's demographic problem enters the equation, the picture becomes clearer. The working age population is declining, aging accelerating. By 2030, China will have more people over 60 than America's entire population. Without technology transfer from Russia and continued access to American technologies, China's innovation capacity becomes severely constrained. Xi Jinping's greatest fear is conducting a Taiwan operation alone, against America plus Japan plus Australia, without Russian support. Chinese military planners always assumed Russian support would pin down American forces in Europe. Without that assumption, the entire strategic calculus changes. But China has cards to play too: rare earth elements, global supply chains, the world's largest market. But these advantages diminish if China faces isolation. Trump's Ukraine plan terrifies Europe. Germany's energy security faces new uncertainty. Poland's territorial fears could reach panic levels. France's strategic autonomy dreams suddenly appear naive. But there's very little Europe can do. All of Europe combined spends roughly $300 billion on defense annually. The United States spends $800 billion. European capabilities remain fundamentally dependent on American support. This reality is included in Trump's calculations. Europe will object, but will adapt. Projects to build European armies will take 10 years to reach meaningful capability. By then, it will be too late. Trump's strategy will turn the Middle East balance in America's favor. Iran's biggest supporters were Russia and China. Without this support network, Iran's regional position becomes untenable. Iranian proxies depend on Russian weapons and Chinese financing. Israeli-Saudi rapprochement is back on the agenda. Russian technology was critical for Iran's nuclear program. If this support is cut, Tehran's nuclear timeline extends significantly. Turkey's situation is complex. Erdogan was balancing between Russia and NATO. If this balance is disrupted, he must make new calculations. Turkish operations in Syria become more difficult without Russian coordination. Gulf countries are pleased with Trump's plan. America will return to the regional protector role in exchange for energy security. After the Ukraine agreement, America's attention will shift to Asia-Pacific, Taiwan's defense, military integration with Japan and South Korea, Australia's AUKUS program. All will accelerate as resources currently devoted to European security redirect to Pacific deterrence. Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, these countries' alliance search against China will increase. China, without Russian support, may act more aggressively to secure its position before the window closes. Japan's rearmament is central to Trump's plan. By changing its post-World War II constitution, Japan will achieve full military capacity. A fully rearmed Japan could spend $200 billion on defense by 2030, creating the world's second most powerful military. For China, this represents a historical nightmare. South Korea faces an impossible choice between nuclear deterrence and economic prosperity as China threat grows while Russian influence on North Korea diminishes. Trump's real weapon is technology embargo. China's dependence on America in artificial intelligence, semiconductors, quantum computing continues despite massive domestic investment. The technological gap remains substantial in critical areas, and this gap will be weaponized more aggressively than ever before. Without Russian mathematical and physics talent covering China's fundamental research gaps, technological isolation becomes complete. Russian aerospace expertise was helping China develop hypersonic weapons. Russian cybersecurity knowledge was crucial for Chinese information warfare capabilities. This cooperation ending leaves China facing isolation from both directions. The global technology supply chain built through companies like TSMC, ASML, NVIDIA will be restructured to exclude China completely. This could freeze Chinese technological development at current levels, while American and allied capabilities continue advancing. China's 2030 technology goals become impossible to achieve without access to cutting-edge Western and allied technologies. China's countermove lies in rare earth elements essential for American defense systems, solar panel technology that dominates global markets, and electric vehicle batteries. But America is already building alternative supply chains through partnerships with Australia, Canada, and African nations. The race is on to see which side can achieve independence first. Here's Trump's first 100-day calendar, days 1 to 30, secret negotiations with Putin for Ukraine, Energy cooperation offers and sanctions relief in exchange for breaking Chinese ties. Days 31 to 60, announcement of comprehensive technology embargoes against China, pressure on allies to join the technology blockade. Days 61 to 90, massive military buildup in Asia Pacific, new defense agreements with Japan, Australia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Days 91-100, revival of anti-Iran coalition in the Middle East with renewed Israeli-Saudi cooperation. The timeline is ambitious but achievable. Each phase builds on the previous one, creating momentum that becomes difficult to reverse. By day 100, the strategic landscape will be fundamentally altered. If this plan works, the world order will be unrecognizable by 2025's end. America will achieve clear technological and military superiority over China. Russia becomes a neutralized power focused on its own reconstruction. Europe remains more dependent on America than ever. Of course, this plan isn't without substantial risks. Putin could break the agreement while extracting maximum concessions from both sides. Russian leaders have historically treated agreements with the West as tactical tools, not binding commitments. China might accelerate its Taiwan timeline before American isolation takes full effect. European leaders could pursue independent relationships with both Russia and China, fragmenting the Western alliance. The biggest risk remains internal opposition within America itself. Democrats will accuse Trump of selling Ukraine to Putin and betraying democratic values worldwide. Neoconservatives will denounce any agreement with Russia as appeasement of authoritarian aggression. The media will make constant comparisons to Chamberlain's Munich Agreement. But Trump's 4-year electoral mandate gives him enormous discretion in international relations, especially in the crucial early period. China's most likely countermove is immediate pressure on Taiwan before American resources fully shift to the Pacific theater. This could force Trump into either military response or appearing weak to nervous allies watching American credibility. If this plan succeeds, Trump will be remembered as the leader who changed the 21st century's trajectory. The comparison to Roosevelt's alliance management or Nixon's China opening would be inevitable. In case of failure, America's prestige will be irreversibly damaged. The credibility of American security guarantees could collapse, leading to nuclear proliferation as allies lose faith. But the geopolitical reality is clear. America cannot sustain a two-front war with current strategy. The resources don't exist, public support isn't there. America had to choose between confronting Russia in Europe or China in Asia. This is cold but logical calculation. Power balances govern states, not emotions. Trump understands this fundamental principle. Whether you agree with his methods, his strategic logic is sound. Divide enemies, focus resources, never fight the war your opponent wants. The next 100 days will determine the world's future. The world order is about to pass its greatest test since 1945, and the outcome will define the next quarter century of global politics.